the Fat Health Teacher. I was listening to a podcast today called Flash Forward, and the title of the podcast is Bot for Teacher. I'm actually going to put the link down here for you. And what was really interesting, well, this triggered a couple of thoughts for me. So, first, the idea of AI enhanced education. So, if you've ever read Ender's Game, where he had the little pad, and then as he interacted with it, it adapted to what he was doing. The education was specifically tailored to that student based on their output, right? And one of the reasons that this was a fascinating listen for me is because I remember very clearly sitting in my junior high classroom. And I don't remember which class it was, but I remember thinking, ugh, I wish I could just move on. Because there was something that the teacher was trying to get across to students. There were quite a few students who just, they weren't getting it. I had grasped it very quickly because that's just something that I do. And so I was having to wait, right? And at this point, I'd already kind of learned not to be raising my hand for everything that I knew because that caused me additional social issues. So I was just sitting there waiting for everybody else to figure it out. And I really, really, really wanted to be in a cubicle, just able to move at my own pace. I desperately wanted this. Obviously, that didn't happen. But in this flash forward, the way flash forward works is that it kind of introduces you to a scenario at the beginning. And in this scenario, it had a student, and what you hear is you hear the AI voice, and it is prompting the student to do different things. And it's giving examples. It'll say things like, let's review the essay that you turned in. Or, don't forget you have a test tomorrow. Or, it looks like you may not have read this material. Let's review it together. Things that a teacher would say. And I was actually kind of impressed by this future that they had imagined. Okay, so Flash Forward is it's a weekly podcast, and it is hosted by Rose Eveleth. She's got a fantastic little voice. As you're listening, there will be other voices in order to promote the imagined future. And what I really like about this is she's looking at both the pros and the cons, right? So she first presents this future, and then she's talking about, well, where are we? How close is this to being a reality? And then she looks at, well, what are the risks if this is the direction that we move? Which I also thought was quite intriguing. So, where are we? Well, we're actually pretty close. There is a program called the Dreambox, which kind of targets, it's made for preschool, early elementary students. And students will learn, so they will be asked to do something, and if they demonstrate through their actions that they don't get it, or if they seem to be having trouble, what the inventor of this says is that it will actually pull you out of the program so that the student doesn't hit that frustration level, and then it will adjust it in order to make sure or reteach the stuff that they seem to not understand, which is actually pretty cool. There was a professor, and what he did is he did this experiment where this online class that he teaches, that he's been teaching for several years, that is normally monitored by multiple TAs. One of the TAs was a computer, and I believe its name was Jill Watson. And people would ask this computer questions, and it would respond as a TA would, because he realized that a lot of the questions that students were asking didn't actually need a human response, although they did need a response. And these responses required quite a lot of time in order to get through. So he introduced it, didn't tell anybody that it was an AI, and then he told them at the very end of the semester. And what he's looking at doing in the future in order to continue researching this idea of having AI TAs, if you will, is to tell the students that you will have a couple of the TAs are AIs, but we're not going to tell you who they are. And we're not going to tell you how many of them are AIs. And looking to see if the interactions with the TAs change as well as how quickly students are able to identify which TAs are artificial. So that's interesting. And then this also got me to thinking about, um, you know, it has really felt in the education community like people who are not in education are trying to boil down our jobs as teachers to put A in, get B out, and then you're good, right? And one of the ways that they've been doing this is with testing. So they figure if you're doing your job, then a student's test scores are going to go up. And they ignore a lot of the factors that are there because if you're a good teacher, those factors aren't going to matter. Okay? And that was stated with quite a lot of sarcasm in case you didn't notice. Okay, so as I said, these programs will use algorithms to monitor your skills and to adjust the program. The belief by many of the people who are pushing this is that children have an intrinsic desire to learn, and if you make things available for them, then they will learn at kind of their own paces. And there are non-computer based schools that also believe this. I believe Montessori is similar in that students have a lot of options in what they're choosing, and they can choose to focus on a specific thing, and they'll kind of get very in-depth on that. But that they get to drive their own learning, which is a very interesting thing. So the next thing that she talks about was, what is the purpose of school? And a lot of people are saying yes, the importance of school is to provide information, right? To help students learn how to think and to be critical and all of that. But the other thing is you get all of the social aspects of school. You get how to interact with people. Like I said, I had learned by junior high that I need to not raise my hand for everything because it caused problems for me. So you get the personal interactions, you learn empathy, you learn how to network, you're getting practical skills. And if somebody is isolated at home with a computer and that's how they're doing all of their learning, they're not getting any of that. And that's not to say that that might that couldn't be an option, but the idea of it being the only thing is a bit concerning. So Rose pointed out things like just logistics. If suddenly students are learning on these individualized computers, are we getting rid of schools? Like, what happens as far as childcare goes? If you are doing pod kind of stuff, are the kids going to go to school and then, like, there are class monitors? They're not actually teachers. They're kind of to make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing on the computer or something else. There are problems with what are the students accessing. So if a student, so let's say you want them to learn all of this, and they focus on this item right here, and they go really in depth, is the computer program going to go back and make sure that they are interested in all the other stuff, or like what's going to happen? What if they're terrible at using the computer for whatever reason? They just don't understand it. I know one of the things that I focus on with my tech students is if it's on the internet, it's not necessarily true. And I think most of you have seen the commercial with the French model, right? And I will see if I can find it here. But it's just that idea that if it's on the internet, some people believe that the internet's infallible and that thing is automatically true. But the truth is, anybody can put anything on the internet, all right? And the way I tell it to my students is I could create a website that makes it look like I know absolutely everything there is about cars. And I could talk about how I use my race car, and I could talk about stuff. I could basically just make a bunch of stuff up using the right lingo and pretend I know what I'm talking about. And unless you've actually done some research, and unless you are also a car enthusiast, you're not going to be able to call me on my BS because you're not going to know. If you are somebody who's a beginner and you're looking at where to start or things that you can do to soup up your standard car, then you might use my webpage, and the information that I'm giving you might actually destroy your car. Okay? So you got to be careful about what's on there. The other things that could be problematic are reading skills, right? Or there could be cultural differences where something that is referred to in the computer program is not understood by the person. So this then brought me to testing, because in order for any of these programs to adjust what they're doing, there has to be a method of evaluation, right? If the computer's not evaluating current levels, then it's not going to be able to make a plan in order to increase those levels. So something that I have seen with our students is we have, if you are not from the state of New Mexico, you are not aware of this, but over the last 2 years, we have shifted to completely computer-based testing. Okay, so when students take that big test at the end of the year that is supposed to evaluate their reading and language arts and math skills, it's all on the computer. And what we're seeing, at least what I'm seeing, is that this is introducing a level of stress that some of the kids just cannot, like, they're having a really hard time with it, and I have seen them just check out. And so instead of actually trying, instead of attempting to read what's going on and figure out what they need to click and what they need to manipulate on the computer, they're just kind of clicking around, figuring out a way to get the computer to tell them that they're done. Okay? So the interface is an issue. The multiple step program is an issue. So yeah, these are very real problems. And if you've got those difficulties, how accurate are the results going to be when you finally do get the test results? One of Rose's guest speakers talked about, the reason we want to move towards computers is because teachers are not valued. And I absolutely agree with this. I will talk to people who are not in education, and it seems like it's a very easy job when you are on the outside, but they are not able to grasp kind of all of the things that go into education. And so with the increased technology, people are looking at, well, this is going to be a way for us to educate people that may not have access to education. Okay? And there was actually a program called Hole in the Wall where a guy went to India, set up a whole bunch of kiosks where the kids could just interact with things and they could learn, and the kiosks are now defunct. They are damaged, they are abandoned, and while it was being used, the use was being dominated by boys. So theoretically, this is going to make education more easily accessed, but certainly not in that mode. Okay. So the other thing that this talked to me about, or this brought to mind, was an experiment that I remember learning about, probably in Sociology 101. But I was able to find it. And this was an experiment that was done with rhesus monkeys. It was part of a series of studies done by Harry F. Harlow. It was referred to as the Monkey Love Experiment. And what I had remembered, which I thought was interesting, is that he wanted to know, kind of how much of a role or how important parental impact was. And so he took baby rhesus monkeys that were separated from their mothers within days of birth, and he put them in a cage where you had one thing that was like a metal frame. It gave them the milk that they needed, and then you had the other one where it was like soft and kind of cuddly. Even though the monkeys were getting their sustenance from the metal thing, they were spending more time with the fleece one. Now, when he separated them, so I assume this was a different batch, he put some in a cage. They just had the metal frame and the milk, and then he put others in a cage where it was metal frame covered with fleece and milk. And he found that even though they ate the same amount and they seemed to physically develop the same, that their psychological development was very different. And I don't want to completely go into this, but I think it kind of, I think it's applicable to what we're looking at with education as far as whether or not computers can replace teachers. Because yes, you're providing the basic needs of education, but you're not addressing any of the other things. So as a teacher, some of the things that I do is I'm paying attention to how my students are doing. If they're having a rough day, I talk to them. I show interest in them. I see them as individuals. Okay? A computer's not going to do that. No matter how much it or how advanced systems are, it's still not going to be that human touch. It's still not going to be that physical presence, which I think is important. So that's my spiel. This is the Fat Health Teacher, and I am signing out. Thank you.